Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Akinwolere. On Saturday night, Mo Salah spoke, telling reporters the club has thrown him under the bus. With his patchy form, combined with these comments, will the Egyptian king play for Liverpool again? All right, in with us today, we have a full house. We've got Simon Hughes, who's author of Chasing Salah, the biography. We've also got Ollie Kane. We've got Adam Crafton as well. So Mo Salah was benched for the third successive game on Saturday night after Liverpool's 3-3 draw with Leeds United. He had a few things to get off his chest. If you somehow have missed it, well, here are some of the highlights.
Seems like a club is throwing me under the bus. That's how I feel it. I think it's very clear that someone wants me to get all the blame. The club promised me in the summer for a lot of promises and nothing. So far, I'm in the bench 3 games, so I can't say that they keep the promise. And I said that many times before. I had a good relationship with the manager, and out of the sudden, we don't have any relationship. I don't know why. It seems to me, how I see it, it's someone doesn't want to be in the club.
Yeah, David Ornstein on Monday afternoon has reported that he's now set to be dropped for the trip to Inter on Tuesday night, despite training ahead of the games. Simon, let's start with you on this one. Salah does not speak often to the media, actually. I think in 8 years, only a handful of times that I've counted. How extraordinary is this latest outburst, in your opinion?
It's extraordinary in the sense of the revelations that came from it. Obviously, the talk of broken relationship with the manager, being thrown under the bus by the club, broken promises. These are big claims. And it lays naked the state of affairs at Liverpool and how vulnerable the club is at the moment and how disjointed things are. But it is part of a pattern of behaviour from Salah. He has done this before. He does only speak when there is a reason for him to speak, and it's usually relating to something involving himself. And it usually happens when he feels cornered. So, yeah, it's extraordinary, but it is part of a pattern. And that is where I think if you look at the club, perhaps this could have been managed. That the club knows exactly what Mohamed Salah is like. If he's unhappy about something that he considers serious, he will speak about it. And it sort of feels like the situation's got away from the club very quickly. And this is a club, remember, that has been credited over a long period of time of being ahead of things. And it feels like Liverpool are on the back foot at the moment. Although it does sound like that they've made a decision to remove him from the squad against Inter Milan tomorrow night, which, does show that there's a level of authority there.
Yeah. Any justification for this, Adam? I mean, his form hasn't been the greatest, in fairness. Neither has the teams. But this is quite an explosive thing to come out with.
Yeah, I think maybe there's been loads of people saying, that it's behaviour of a kind of slightly spoiled, aging player raging against the dying of the light. Very reminiscent of kind of sort of what we've seen over the years at times from people like Ronaldo and Messi when they don't get the attention that they necessarily want as they get older. I think the counterpoint is when you take the 3 games he's been put on the bench for, West Ham, Sunderland, and then Leeds. I don't think you can do that with, probably your best paid player, your most famous, celebrated player, and not expect a reaction. I think from a management perspective, if it was once, okay, if it was twice, but when it's 3 times in a week against teams that he would consider himself able to score quite a few goals against, I think it would be naive on Slop's part to think that's not going to lead to a reaction just before he goes off to Afcon. So, yeah, I mean, it's very compelling.
It is. Well, it's great for us because we're talking about it. I mean, look, he did talk about being thrown under the bus, Ollie, in many respects. But, you look at the numbers, Ekitike, Gakpo, Szoboszlai, for instance, bigger numbers than Mo Salah this season. Does he have a point? Do you think he premeditated this before he went out and actually spoke what some might class his truth?
I I have little doubt that he left that dressing room intending to say his piece. I mean, he doesn't speak very often to anybody, but in terms of media. But he's done very few of those sort of post-match mix zone interviews in the whole of his 7.5 years at Liverpool, 8.5 years at Liverpool. So yeah, it was calculated. I know he was frustrated, but it seemed very measured, almost. What he was saying, I'm sure he was angry, but it looked measured. He looked like he knew what he was going to say. But in terms of that situation about him having been left out the last 3 matches, I think it's just particularly difficult when, for the first half of this season and for the first month of this season, where he's not been playing well, and at times last season where he wasn't playing well, and at times under Jurgen Klopp in the final season where he certainly wasn't playing well towards the end of that season. It looked like it was very difficult for managers to take him off. So he's gone from playing 90 minutes in almost every game, almost looking untouchable, to looking like he's now completely out of favour. And I'd say that is surprising. I know you can look at the game state of those last 3 games and think, well, there is an argument against having brought him on again at West Ham at 2-0 up or at Leeds at 2-0 and 3-2 up. But I do feel like he's probably entitled to feel, why on earth have I gone from playing all the time to being sort of the scapegoat, seemingly, for the team's problems? It's not as if they've played brilliantly without him the last 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are pretty good, though. You know that, Simon. 250 goals in 420 games for Liverpool. And, I don't know any player at that level who doesn't have that sort of main character energy. If they're being left out, they're going to speak out about it, let's face it. But, he's the highest earner in the club, in many respects. He's a vital player that they gave him a contract end of last season because they believed in what he could do this season. I mean, does he have a point here?
On some issues, yes, but on others, no. I think where he's lost people is the idea that he's proven himself, and then that more or less justifies his inclusion in the team. That's sort of what he's the main argument that he's had here. He's done it time and time again. Yes, we accept that, but you can't just turn up to training and think that, well, that's me in the team just merely by turning up and being available. We obviously don't know the details of the conversation that's happened between Slot and Mohamed Salah, and in many ways, it's one of the football's oldest stories. Player suddenly finding out that his value perhaps isn't quite what he thinks it is or it should be to the team, and reacting and being very unhappy about it. What is different, obviously, is that this is now playing out in public, particularly at a club at Liverpool, where traditionally things, Liverpool over a long period of time, going back to the 60s, kept everything in-house. And the idea that anyone spoke out, particularly about the manager, it just didn't happen. Players would grumble and moan privately. They still do about decisions that were made in the 1980s about the direction of players' careers and certain managers that let players go. They get angry still talking about the manager, but they never went out in public. Obviously, since then, football's moved on. This is what happens now in football. Players, not always, but quite often, are willing to sort of let it be known publicly that they are unhappy. What is quite unusual is it's rarely will a player come out and directly represent himself alone, and reveal this, and I think people find it quite hard to accept for all sorts of different reasons, but primarily because we do, whether it's fans or journalists, we do moan about players not coming out and speaking, using anodyne lines that people are sort of so familiar with. And, the access alone justifies the presence of journalists being there. On this occasion, Salah has come out and actually told us something we don't know, and a lot of people don't like it. Now, I understand why people don't like it, but as you said, it is sort of his truth, and it does shed light on what is happening at Liverpool at the moment. I'm sort of I'm torn with it because from a journalistic point of view, of course, we want to know exactly what's going on. And this is roughly, this is obviously an issue for Salah and he has spoken about it. So to condemn him seems a bit hypocritical. But equally, I also see the point that this does nothing for anybody. I don't think it improves anyone's position, whether it's Salah, the manager, and it certainly doesn't help Liverpool in the short term. So, the situation is a bit of a mess.
If it is his truth, Adam, surely he's able to control how that truth is delivered, but also articulate himself in ways he sees fit, I should say.
I'm kind of with Simon. I'm not sure who this helps at this time. It's not like it's what's the bargaining here? Unless he genuinely wants to leave the club, which he suggested he might, then okay, this, I guess, brings it to a head. He goes off African Cup of Nations. In the meantime, they can sort out a move for January. But to me, it seemed more like, I'm grumpy, I'm not playing, I want the world to know this, I want to be playing again. And as a result of that, he's now put a huge amount of pressure on himself if he does play on Saturday or Sunday, whenever they play against Brighton. And then also will create really like a month of speculation in the time he's away that will put huge pressure on the club. And he's also, only a few months into a multi-year contract, a huge multi-year contract. So if he's leaving, how does that work? Does he expect to be paid up? Does, is it a shake hands and pay me up situation? Is it, do Liverpool want a transfer fee for him? How does this all work? So it's one of those where he's presented some information, but it leaves you with kind of 10 to 15 more questions that probably I doubt people are going to get out of Mo Salah over the next few weeks. And it does also give, I think Jamie Carragher said this before, Salah to me seems like someone who talks publicly when he wants something. And he's very good at using the media. Media obviously always very grateful to speak to Mo Salah whenever he is available. But I do find it very, kind of like transactional, the way he uses the media. I find it quite charmless. Last season when he comes out and, it was all of a sudden these, post-match television interviews when the contract negotiations are going on. And I remember speaking to someone at Liverpool at the time and I was saying to them, are you worried, that Salah's going to go? And they said, no, we just know he's dancing the public dance. This is what Salah does. This is kind of who he is. And I think that's what we're seeing again now. He's not getting his own way, so he's stomping his feet. And it is the behaviour, I think, that we increasingly see of some of these individuals who are amazing, world-class individuals, but just cannot handle things not going entirely their way within football clubs. Is that too mean?
I don't know. I think it's very accurate in fairness. He does love to say, there will be fire if I'm to stop and speak today or something along those lines. I think it's a man who knows the power of his words. Well, one of the most extraordinary elements in this actually from the Salah interview was the revelation of his relationship with Arne Slot and how it's broken down, Ollie. I mean, how damaging is this for Arne Slot? But also, where does it put him in this situation?
It puts him in an extremely difficult situation, not least because of Salah's enormous popularity with the fan base and the fact that it comes at a time when Slot's popularity is being stretched and being strained by a really, really poor run of results and by a very obvious struggle in recent months to do the job he wants to be able to do. And there's been a sense of things slightly unraveling for Slot and his position being weakened over recent months, and the club have tried to stand behind him and show that they're still fully behind him. But something like this, it enormously weakens a position unless sometimes you can get it where a manager can turn a situation like this into a positive. And Adam referenced the Cristiano Ronaldo situation at Manchester United in 2022 earlier. For a very short time, I feel like that actually worked in Erik ten Hag's favour. The way he kind of managed it, but the only way to do it really was by sort of sidelining Ronaldo. Ultimately, Ronaldo left, and then in the short term, results went really good, and it all looked more unified. I don't think it's very easy to get to that sort of unity position by marginalising Salah, by losing it, by allowing him to leave the club or whatever. It might prove to be the right solution in January. We just don't know. But at the moment, it looks like it would be something that would perhaps in some ways weaken Slot's position. I just don't. I can't see a good outcome for Slot in this situation where a player of Salah's stature has come out and basically said that they don't have a relationship. It's very difficult. I don't think it's an ideal situation going into a game the size that they've got in the Champions League away to Inter on Tuesday night. It's a total distraction. It's creating a lot of outside noise of the type that Liverpool have been very good at keeping out in recent years. They've looked like a very sort of settled, stable, unified club. This creates a totally different scenario, and if Liverpool win without him in Milan, it looks it looks like that's the statement victory that Arne Slot and the team need. But I don't think it would make this situation go away.
Yeah, who's it playing into the hands of, Simon? As someone who has followed and covered this club for a while.
Everton, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City. Not Manchester United.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think there's a temptation to think about what this says about Arne Slot, his way of dealing with players, his position at the club. Salah, I don't want to say he's a recluse. He's a respected. He's hugely respected at Liverpool. He doesn't have many close relationships, but I think he has a good understanding of what is going on and who thinks what about whom. And I do wonder, aside from his own interests, what's given him the confidence to come out against the manager at this time. Obviously, the manager is in a weak position, and this weakens his position, I would say. But Mohamed Salah, let's not forget, has had public spats with Sadio Mane, albeit it was more visible from Mane's side during a game. This was at a time when Liverpool were trying to win the league. He had a very public fallout with Jurgen Klopp. Didn't think that highly of Jurgen Klopp. This is the manager who delivered everything at Liverpool. So he is a person who has a huge sense of independence, put it that way. And he's a unique footballer in lots of different ways because of where he's from, because of his experiences and the way he's represented. And I just think that all of this needs considering when you are making decisions of significance about him. And that's not saying give him special treatment, but this is what Liverpool have done since day one with him. Even in the good times, they knew that Salah liked to feel good about himself. And to some degree, even needed that reassurance, even if he was scoring all these goals. Now, I'm sort of repeating my point from earlier, but I just wonder whether this situation could have been handled a bit better generally by the club. Slot has a very sort of blunt way of putting things, and I think that can work in his favour in the good times. But if he's delivering bad news, I can imagine. If it's relating to not taking part in another game, sometimes maybe there's an element of diplomacy that's needed with somebody like Salah. Again, I'm not saying that he should have special treatments, but I do think that knowing what Liverpool know about him, could this have just been handled a little bit better by not just Slot, but the people at the club? There are some people who are saying, well, maybe this is what Liverpool wants. This is what, Liverpool have mapped out, so it makes it easier to get rid of him. But in the short term, it just heaves so much pressure onto Slot, and all the noise coming out of Liverpool at the moment, when I say noise, the whisperings is that Slot has the full support of the owners and the directors. So this benefits nobody, really.
Yeah, do you know when you referenced the club and you said someone not wanting me at the club, is that further up than Slot, do you reckon?
Well, this is the thing with Salah. He is very direct about certain issues. He clearly, obviously, wanted to make a point about Slot, but then he can be very cryptic about other issues. And I suppose that's where the frustration is. I mean, maybe he doesn't have that answer. Maybe he suspects that a decision has been made. I know, all the way through his time at Liverpool, when he's renewed contracts previously in 2022, there was always the suspicion that Liverpool didn't really want to renew. And then there was this suspicion last year, that Liverpool didn't really want to renew. They had ideas of the individuals who were sort of influencing the decision making around the club. But maybe he doesn't have that categorical proof. And that means that he doesn't have the confidence to come out and say exactly who he thinks is made a decision to either get him out the team or get him out the club, because that's clearly what he thinks at this moment. So evidently, if Liverpool are thinking oppositely, there's going to have to be some effort to sort of bring them back together somehow and have some adult conversations.
Adult conversations, man, indeed. Richard Hughes and also FSG CEO of football, Michael Edwards. They've got to face up to this one, Ollie. This is probably one of the biggest decisions they'll have to make whilst they've been at the club.
I don't know. There's in terms of the new setup with Michael Hughes and Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes. I think they've had big decisions from day one. I mean, they walked in and the first one was how to replace Jurgen Klopp, and then there's been all the big contract decisions last year with Klopp, with Van Dijk and with Salah, and the attempt to renegotiate with Alexander-Arnold, and then there was all the huge number of transfers in and out over the summer. It feels like it's it's not exactly first test territory, and they, I know that the jury is very much out on the summer transfer business, widely acclaimed at the time, but looking sort of more questionable with hindsight. But yeah, this is another. I mean, they are bright and intelligent guys, but not infallible. And this is a real test for how to handle it. I apologise for harking back to Manchester United and Cristiano Ronaldo again, but I do think it's a really interesting parallel, not identical situation, but parallel. It felt at the time with that like the lack of. I can't remember. Adam, did they have? Was John Murtough sport sort of director of football at the time, but not really a kind of powerful, empowered, experienced figure in that position. There was a bit of a gap between sort of manager and ownership, and it felt like that there was a real sort of power vacuum at Manchester United at that time, and that sort of situation just completely unravelled, didn't it?
Yeah, there's a difference in that, and that actually at the time, as hard as it may now be to believe, is Manchester United looked like they were going somewhere under Ten Hag at the time, and we were actually doing okay without Ronaldo playing, and that's not something that's happening yet with Liverpool and Salah. It is just a team that looks broken and a relationship that looks broken at the moment, rather than
3 games unbeaten, Adam.
3 games unbeaten, of course, but not where Liverpool would have wanted to be. I think. I mean, the one aspect we've not mentioned is maybe this. If I'm trying to get in the head of Mo Salah, I do wonder if he is looking at other, and this is purely speculation, is he looking at other players in the team, long-standing players who have also not had the best season and are continuing to be picked week in, week out, whether that is Konate or even Van Dijk in recent weeks. I'm sure there's other players as well, but I wonder if there is a bit of that where he's like, well, I'm not the guy at centre-back who's, blowing up the defence once a game at the moment. And I suspect that may be an element of, how a big player might feel, when they are one of the individuals who at least feels scapegoated for the suffering of a team at a certain time. I don't know that's the case, but I imagine it's it's possible. I think as well, the other thing that I wonder about the ownership and about the kind of whole Michael Edwards world is I think they are incredibly smart. I also think they have this kind of smartest man in the room tendency where they kind of feel, they appear to feel as though they will always win every negotiation and every situation. And, you know, we saw that in the summer with how far they pushed the Isaac situation, which, you know, in theory worked out for them in the end, although it came so late that the team has not adapted whatsoever. But the other side of that is it really didn't work for them when they pushed it to the wire with Mark Gay. And, you know, this is maybe a whole different conversation itself, but it's tempting to wonder how different Liverpool's season would have been if they had just acted a bit more, a bit more recklessly from a spending perspective, but a bit more sensibly in terms of paying that bit more to get Gay into the team and giving themselves another option at centre-back. So I think they've had so many wins over the years in the transfer market and getting decisions right that I just wonder whether they'd almost just have this feeling that they're always going to get it right. You know, a bit like, I don't know if they'll like this comparison. David Cameron wins the Scottish referendum, right? They definitely won't. David Cameron wins the Scottish referendum.
Adam, can I just stop you there, please?
There's some of us coming in.
No, because this is a good analogy.
Go on.
And he then thinks, and he's won a couple of elections, and he thinks, I'm a winner. I'm going to keep winning, so I'm going to do the Brexit referendum as well. And then all of a sudden, something comes along that it smacks you in the face when you're not expecting it. And I just wonder whether they've just got a bit too sure that they're always going to win all of these negotiations. And at some point you won't. At some point situations come along which are less difficult to manage. And then there's the other thing of just like, was it a good idea to give Salah the length of contract at his age? We all thought it was, at the time, because of his physique, and players can now play till 40 because they're going to be like powered by AI nutrition. But maybe it wasn't. As
you said, Adam, Virgil van Dijk has been nowhere near as good as he usually is. And, I know ordinarily Arne Slot's comment about Canate always being at the scene of the crime would have been, the headline story over the weekend, I think. But
did he say that? I didn't see that.
He said that. Yeah, it was an incredible thing to say, really. Is it? But Virgil van Dijk's past that defence as well, and it's just not been good defensively for Liverpool. The whole team had just been terrible defensively, and I could understand it if Salah felt that, last season it was my responsibility to score goals. He has this unshakable belief in himself. So the idea that he is suddenly now not good enough to even get on as a substitute for Liverpool will be stinging him, given that he's never been in that position since being at the club.
Adam just questioned whether the quote was the scene of the crime quote was real. I've had 3 moments over the last few days where I've seen a quote appear on Twitter where I've thought that's got to be made up. The first one was Arne Slot sort of referencing how Isak's troubles was because Liverpool didn't have a winger like Jacob Murphy, which I thought, oh God, that's going to get Salah's back up. I think. The second one was the scene of the crime quote, and then the third one was the threw me under the bus quote from Salah on Saturday night.
Ollie, as someone who's literally just come away from watching Gianni Infantino give Trump a peace prize, I think suspension of reality and these quotes being real feel a bit more trivial in the grand scheme.
I know,
but
absolutely. But it's like people are speaking with far too much candor, and I think Arne Slot has this thing where he sort of speaks quite unfiltered at the time, and people like it when it's positive. But he said a few things this season which I think have perhaps been a little bit indelicate, shall we say. I mean, he referred to Ekitike being stupid for taking his shirt off, which he undoubtedly was. But does it need saying publicly? I don't think it does. Does scene of the crime need saying publicly? No. Does the Jacob Murphy point need to be said publicly? No, I don't think it does. And does the manager, the club have thrown me under the bus need to be said publicly? Absolutely not.
Well, let's talk about what comes next, gents, because we've referenced that Salah is heading to Afcon and his first game in 2 weeks will be against Zimbabwe. Look, do we have any sense of how this might affect his time with Egypt? Because some might say this could be a bit of respite for him.
I guess so. There's always a huge pressure and expectation on him when he goes to play for Egypt. In any case, like, I'm not sure people necessarily appreciate in England just how football mad as a nation Egypt is. If you've ever posted anything as a journalist about Mo Salah on social media, once it gets to Egypt, that post is travelling, and it's travelling in all different directions. So there will be a huge pressure on him there, also ahead of the World Cup. Si knows a lot more about this relationship than I do, but at the World Cup draw on Friday, I had a quick chat with the Egypt head coach, who was he was kind of saying that something kind of needs to change for Salah. He was saying, they're in contact a lot. He was saying that he hoped that by sort of going away from Liverpool for a bit during the Afcon Cup of Nations, that he could rediscover his best form for country, and then he could take that back into his club. But I think that has been that relationship between himself and the national team has not always been easy. So, on the one hand, it looks like it could be something that is a respite, but actually, if that group stage doesn't go well, or they don't go as far as they think they will, a huge amount of pressure will come down on that individual's shoulders. I know it helps that he's got, Marmoush there now as well, so there's a bit more of a shared burden with the superstars, but that won't be an easy month for Mo Salah.
And you're off to Afcon, aren't you, Simon, in Morocco? Look, it's going to be fascinating because what should have been conversations around the football is now back to conversations about Mo Salah every time that Egypt play.
I know. I am still looking forward to the tournament, but I've got a feeling that I'm going to be following Mo Salah around quite a lot. Egypt to have the group stage in Agadir, and Adam's totally right. This is not going to be a couple of weeks in winter sun for Salah. He is going to be under lots of pressure. He's never won an Afcon before. He's judged in Egypt really against the group of players that went before him, who delivered 3 Afcon titles in a row. Egypt have qualified for 2 World Cups since that moment. But and Salah's been critical to those qualifications, but Egypt takes a great pride in its success in Afcon. It's the most successful country in Afcon history. So if he finishes his career without winning an Afcon, it will be a mark against him, I think. So yeah, it's really they're in a tough group as well, Egypt. I think that they're playing South Africa the second game, who are not to be underestimated. They're amongst the favourites. Angola are always tough as well, and Zimbabwe are not going to be easy. So they'll have to start the tournament well, otherwise they'll fall under a lot of pressure very quickly. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating month. I am looking forward to it. Who knows what the story will be by then? It's the opening game's 2 weeks away. I suppose a lot will depend on what happens this Saturday when Salah either plays or does not play against Brighton.
Yeah, let's go around the houses very quickly then. And once the dust has settled, let's look at the outlook potentially for Salah. Ollie, will he play for Liverpool again?
Yes. I'll say yes. I'll predict yes. He's the murmurs from out of the club this morning have been that if he's not on the flight to Milan, which we believe to be the case at the time of recording, then it's a one-off thing. It's not even being described as a punishment, but the talk has been quite, sort of diplomatic, I would say. Nobody's saying that Salah's burned his bridges and is finished. The suggestion is that he will be sort of considered for selection against Brighton at the weekend. But he's been talking about that as a final game before he says goodbye to Liverpool before he goes to Afcon. But nobody knows whether it's going to be his final game. It's a crazy situation to be in. It's not something anybody would have envisaged a week ago, after he got left out at West Ham. But it feels like being left out of 3 games in a row is something that a player of Salah's status just cannot handle at the age of 33. And I get why, because it's that status is so important to a player, and he has earned that status, but it doesn't mean that you're untouchable forever. So yeah, it will be fascinating to see whether perhaps post the Inter game on Tuesday, whether there's sort of some kind of peace talks and some kind of resolution aimed towards getting some kind of normality before he goes away.
Yeah, the MLS is still available. So Saudi, Adam, what do you reckon?
I have the perfect person to do these peace talks.
Donald Trump.
We can fly him in. What a great idea.
Adam, can you write the column? Please? That would be brilliant.
I would love that. Absolutely love that.
No, I mean, I think he went to. He's been to the Middle East a few times, so he could go to Morocco as well for those talks. As does Gianni. In terms of where he might go, I genuinely think we're quite far away from that point at the moment. I think we're still in the kind of footballer stomping his feet because he wants to play more football kind of thing. I don't think what we're seeing is like that different to the best player being taken off in an under-12s game, and like their dad calling up the coach midweek being like, why isn't my son playing? To be honest, like I don't think this is like something where, and I might be proven wrong, I don't think this is something where Salah like has something lined up ready to go in 3 weeks' time. Like there's always been the link to the Saudi Pro League with him, having such huge status in the Arab world. That would be a huge get, I think, for the Saudi League. Equally, that league is not spending in quite the same way as they were maybe 18 months ago. I do think that is a move that can happen for him at some point. I think from an MLS perspective, I think Inter Miami have other targets. There are a few teams that have been sort of thinking about and talking about going big in the market. San Diego, since they expanded, I think are still looking for a really big name. Chicago have been looking at a big name as well. You wonder whether the New York City team, as they start to look towards their new stadium opening, I think that's 2027, might want a bigger name as well. So that's all. Those are the kind of moves that are going to be discussed. But if he's someone who thinks he should be starting every week in the Premier League for Liverpool, why would he go to MLS in 4 weeks' time? So that's the other element of this. This is someone who clearly still believes he is a world-class footballer. So why would he go at this stage to leagues that would, diminish his exposure? So that's why I do think, the best outcome for him here is to sort this out. And and also the other thing is he would be leaving a lot of money on the table if he was to walk away from Liverpool at this point. So I think there's a lot of incentives for this to be threshed out. Like you wonder where this will leave Slot over time. Like if this relationship can't repair itself and the team continues to lose games, is he trying to force a situation with the coach? And I think that's where Liverpool could get into really dangerous territory, because once you start letting players' relationships decide what happens with the coach, then you start to become a very different club.
Okay, I just wanted to give you some reprieve, Si, because I didn't ask you whether or not Mo Salah would be playing for Liverpool again.
Yesterday, I was finding it hard to see a way back. Like Ollie says, the messages out of Liverpool this morning seem like the situation's under a bit more control. But before offering an answer, I would like to get some sort of impression from the players' side, to be honest, about the development that he's likely not to feature against Inter Milan. I mean, at the moment, I think a lot of people are probably assuming that Salah is accepting of that, which is a strange thing given that his whole issue is about not playing. So, I think a lot is dependent on how Salah responds to being left out of the team for a fourth game.
Okay, let's leave it there, gents. I'll leave you all to ponder what your headline will be if Donald Trump and Infantino came to broker the peace still at Liverpool. I appreciate your time, Adam, Simon and Ollie. And don't forget to like and leave us a comment on the video. We'll catch you soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.